Welcome to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Ed Hernandez, member of the California State Senate. He is a doctor of optometry, so I want to speak with you specifically. Also, Chair of Senate Health?
Yes, that's correct.
So you definitely have your finger on the pulse of the rollout of the Affordable Care Act.
Yes, very much so.
We'll get to healthcare.gov in a moment. Okay. I want to speak about Cover California. What we know is the early statistics tell us that 1/8 of the entire population in our country is in California. 1/7 of the uninsured in our nation's in California. 1/3 of those that signed up under the Affordable Care Act are Californians.
Yes.
What does that tell you?
That tells me that California is doing everything right. We're taking a leadership role in it. The first to have an exchange. The exchange is having very little to no problems. At the beginning, there was a couple of glitches.
Sure.
It is moving forward. It will set the standard for the rest of the country, and we will make it work, and the country will follow.
At the same time, if you listen to the national media, it seems as if the purported success of Cover California is a footnote, which is a bit surprising given that we are California. Right. You know, we are a leader in a lot of different ways with a huge portion of the population. What's your sense as to why the success story of Cover California is not getting the ink that one could argue it should?
The reason why is healthcare reform just in general is controversial, from the Clinton administration even to Medicare.
Sure.
Medicare was just as controversial. So what's happening is the opponents are painting this negative picture, and we're hearing about the federal website, but it overshadows all the positive press, from people who were denied, who now are getting affordable coverage, to the success of not only California, of Washington, of the other states that have their own
Kentucky.
Kentucky,
Right. I do want to ask you, though, about one issue that continues to be a thorn in the side of the advocates of Cover California, and that focuses on the navigators.
Right.
These are human beings who help those navigate literally through the process. You know, this is not, as President Obama recently said, it's not like you're going to Amazon.com and buying a book. I mean, this is a complicated process. And so California endeavored to hire 16,000 navigators. We're not anywhere near that number on the ground. What's happening on that front?
You know, this is a huge undertaking. It's massive, and we will get to that point. But the navigators are going to be able to assist people in all languages: Spanish, Chinese, Filipino.
But we got to get it soon.
Yeah, and we're working there. We're getting there. But keep in mind how big of a change this is, and where we're at, and how much more we've got to go.
Couldn't one argue, and I'm pushing you, so indulge me, that we should have had these navigators ready on October 1st?
Yeah, I would say we should have, but you know, there's a lot of things we should have done. I mean, you know, if hindsight is 20/20, then there's a lot of things the president should have done.
We'll talk about healthcare.gov, believe me.
But you know, it'll move forward. I'm convinced.
You mentioned communities that have languages dominant other than English. Where are we on that front? I want to focus most specifically on our Spanish-speaking friends and neighbors, because very significant portion of our population falls into that category. And if Cover California is going to be successful, when you think about those that are uninsured, many are Spanish dominant.
Well, as I said, the success of the Affordable Care Act of the nation is going to be dependent on California, and California's success will be dependent on what's going to happen, how we sign up the Latino population, which is the largest growing in the community that needs the greatest need.
Right.
The numbers are increasing.
They are.
They're in Spanish, where the navigators are in Spanish.
Right.
There's going to be Spanish language. They're going to be in the various PSAs. So it's moving in that direction.
What about young Latinos? And look, I could say what about the young period, but let me ask you about both, if I may, because if the Affordable Care Act is going to survive, you know as well as anyone, we need to see that mix between young and older. And since it's the Latino population is a higher percentage of those that are uninsured, if the young Latinos sign up, that's a benefit to the overall plan.
Yeah, definitely. You know, yes, it's important. It's not the most important thing. But keep in mind that what's helping the Affordable Care Act and bringing the young in is the fact that individuals up to age 26 can be covered under their parents' plan.
That's true.
Also, in the state of California, whether you're a UC student or a CSU student, put aside private institutions, but even private institutions are requiring that the students have some type of insurance. The UCs are required. We're going to be working with the various state agencies, the UCs, the CSUs, So that's going to kind of help, with that as well. The ones that we have to deal with are the ones who aren't in college, who are working, who think they're invincible.
Right.
And the market needs to get to those individuals, and they will.
Let's speak of healthcare.gov. It's the website for 36 states, which by definition causes challenges. Each state, in theory, each state was supposed to have its own exchange and own website, but certain GOP governors opted against for whatever reason. Are the foibles of healthcare.gov hurting California and covered California as a result of the confusion of whether any website's working?
Here's what's happening. It's the federal website, and the problems it's having is overshadowing all of the positive press and all the positive stories. But saying that, it's going to move forward. California is going to make it work. And eventually, I'm convinced that the federal website is going to it's going to work.
Yeah,
it has to. It has to.
The one other issue that's been a thorn in the side of the president is this question of if you like your plan, you could keep it.
Yes.
Now, that issue, in my mind, has gotten very muddied because if folks are losing their plans, it's because they are substandard by almost any definition. Yet the president recently decided, I guess through executive order, I'm not sure exactly how it worked, that if you like your plan, as substandard as that may be, you can keep it for at least through 2014.
Right.
What's your sense of that?
Well, my sense is I think that was a political decision because of all the negative press that the administration is getting. And I think the biggest mistake the president made was he said, if you like your plan, you can keep it. I don't agree with
3 years ago.
Yes, I do not agree with him. I believe that California should move forward with the individuals and if they lose their coverage. But here's the reason why. Let's say the state of California were to extend it for 1 year and 1 year only for those who have junk insurance. Let's say you bought a plan that you didn't read the fine print. During that year period, you extended it and you got sick. But let's say you got cancer. Let's say you were in an automobile accident. The number one reason for bankruptcy in this country is healthcare costs with people who have health insurance.
Interesting.
So how would I as a public official say, okay, you keep your policy, you get sick, you can't get uncovered California, and then you go bankrupt?
And as I understand it, Commissioner Jones, Insurance Commissioner Jones, isn't he working even before the president's plan to try to help those that want to keep their plan?
Yeah, I disagree with him completely. I completely disagree with him because we need to make sure that the success of the Affordable Care Act is such that the exchange is successful, and we're going to need to move people off junk insurance and get them the plans that cover them. They have guarantee issue.
So that message needs to get out. I mean, it's not.
No, it's not.
It's not because people think, oh, I lost my plan. How dare you?
Yeah. Well, they lost their plan because it's junk insurance. It's insurance that doesn't cover what they need to be covered, and they're not going to be taken care of the way they should.
What about the Medicaid expansion? California is a state that has accepted the federal dollars to expand Medicaid. How is that going? Do we know?
It's moving well. The regulatory process is such that it's going to take effect. We have the LIP programs, which are the county programs that are transitioning into Medi-Cal, which we started a couple years ago to get ready for the Medicaid expansion. The monies are going to be available for the counties to do this. We have, like in LA County, you have the two health plan system. We are moving forward, and you're going to see it's going to go up to 138% of poverty level.
But do we have a sense as to whether folks are signing up? Have those figures been released? Will they be released? I know, for example, sir, that if someone contacts Cover California and it winds up that they really would be able to apply for the expansion, which is, because their income is that low, that they will be referred. But do we know where we're at?
The numbers, those we don't have yet.
Okay.
We have Cover California, and when they apply, if they're on 130% of poverty level or their children, they get moved into Medi-Cal. But I believe that California will also increase the number of Medicaid expansion as well, probably more than the rest of the country.
That is the goal. There's no doubt about it.
Very much so.
Because if that doesn't happen, who pays in the final analysis?
The taxpayers. We all pay for it.
His name is Ed Hernandez. He's a member of the California State Senate. My name is Brad Pomerance. You are watching Charter California Edition.
In Los Angeles County, what percentage of the uninsured range in age from 18 to 34? 25, 30, 35, or 40%? Nearly 40% of the uninsured in Los Angeles County fall into the age range of 18 to 34.
Welcome back. It's Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Henry Lowe, he is a member of the school board with Garvey School District. And sir, the Garvey School District recently had an election, an off-year election. 5 candidates, 3 slots open, 3 incumbents running. And generally you would think the incumbents would win, maybe one would go down. But in this election, 2 incumbents lost. 1 incumbent won, and the 2 incumbents that lost were swamped. They weren't even in the game. Sir, how does this happen during an off-year election?
Sure. Well, thank you, Brad, for having me on your show again. And I think that there were a lot of overarching issues in the school district that animated the electorate to
well stated.
Yes, to vote, and you see the result where 2 incumbents who had been on the board for a while didn't get reelected.
The president of your board came in 5th out of 5.
Yes.
He only got 10% of the vote.
Yes.
Whereas the winner,
Yes.
I will say the number 1 vote getter, a challenger, got 28% of the vote.
Yes.
I mean, I know we've spoken about some of the challenges facing Garvey, the superintendent, quite controversial.
Yeah.
But still, to think in an off-year election that the voters got a message that was sufficiently drafted that they clearly knew what they were doing.
Yes.
I mean, you have the top 3 vote getters, 28%, 27%, 24%, and then it drops to 11 and 10.
Right.
That's a clear result.
It is, and I think the results show that clearly the voters and the community were paying attention to what was going on in the school district. And I think that the message was that the community...
Now, what was the message?
I think the message was they were not happy with the direction that the district was going. And I think that this election was really, in many cases, a referendum on the direction of the district.
Right.
I think they liked the direction. They would have kept the incumbent, and they did keep one,
right.
But they threw out the other one.
And I do want to get a sense, why did this one, who we'll be speaking with momentarily, win in this San Gabriel Valley School District?
Well,
why was Bob Bruesch able to come in a solid 2nd place?
I've served with Bob for 10 years now, and Bob has been very actively involved in the community for not just only this past 10 years, but really in the past 30 years.
Well, he was a teacher at Garvey.
He was a teacher.
Right.
He served on city council in Rosemead. And I think what Bob understands that is important, and it's probably cardinal for public elected officials, is that you have to always listen to your stakeholders, and you must always be upfront and transparent and communicate. I think that is really key.
And so what does this tell you about elections generally? As a student of elections, I know you also work with an assembly member, and so, I mean, you really, politics is your profession in the best sense. So what does this tell you?
I think what it tells you is that it is very important to always maintain the support of the people, and you do so by being accessible, number 1. Number 2, by always listening to the concerns, and even if you don't necessarily agree and you vote another way, then but at least you articulate your reason why.
People want to be heard.
They want to be heard.
It's that simple.
They want the public officials to be transparent and honest.
Okay, I want to shift gears, if I may, and speak with you about another area. Some would call it controversial, and it focuses upon what we know as the local control funding formula, LCFF. Changes the way that education is funded K-12 wise. Virtually no more categoricals. Money is given to districts based upon a base grant, and then if the district educates higher numbers of English language learners, foster children, or economically disadvantaged, they get bumps, potentially 2. What do you think?
Well, I supported the governor's local control funding formula. I think that it is going to be good for my school district. It's going to be good for many school districts. And the intent of the LCFF was to take a really close look at where is the need greatest. English language learners, those who come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, to really focus on where we need to invest our dollars.
I understand, and I think intuitively most would agree. English language learners, they present more challenges, economically disadvantaged also. But here's where the rub comes in, if I may say. So if a school district educates a single English language learner, let's say, there's a 20% bump. But under the formula, if the school district has 55% that fall into those 3 categories, there's an additional 50% bump. So that one child, if there's more than 55% of that category, could cause 70% more money to flow into the district. Now, amen to Garvey, because they're probably going to fall into that category.
Right.
But 70% is a lot. That's a huge amount more.
And I think that there has been some critique and some controversy over the LCFF, but the way I look at it is that it is focusing on a group of students that probably really need that extra attention.
And I don't think anyone disagrees,
Yeah.
but 70% worth of need,
Yeah.
70% more need than the other kids.
Well,
We'll see.
we'll see.
Yeah.
And I think the idea is that for those school districts who may not get as much of a bump
Right.
as those school districts, the idea is that those districts or the community they're in may have the wherewithal to
There's the notion of
Yeah.
the PTA fundraising.
Yes,
And
yes.
At what point, though, is a student considered proficient enough that they're no longer English language learners? And is there an incentive to so classify them as ESL when they've advanced?
I think there is incentive because not just for the school district, but really for the student and that student's family.
To be taken off that designation?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Even though that can result in a loss of money for the district?
Well, possibly, but I think that's a good development because what it
Okay.
means is that we're making progress and we are meeting our targets to ensuring that every student reaches their highest potential.
I want to talk about another change in our education system, and it deals with what we know as Common Core.
Yes.
45 states have adopted what we
Yes.
know as the Common Core standards.
Yes.
California is on the forefront of the adoption. As we speak,
Yes.
money is being issued to school districts to adopt these standards. I think $1.25 billion is flowing. How are the school districts doing? Not just Garvey, but I know you're a leader generally. How are the school districts doing with the adoption of Common Core?
I think schools in California, they are working very hard to be ready for Common Core. I know at Garvey, we've been working on this for the past 2 years, and I think in the next 2 years we will be ready to fully implement Common Core.
I want to ask one question. I have asked this of several
Okay.
school leaders, and there may not be an answer, but it's something that I've thought of. Occasionally I have an idea that may actually be worthy of something.
Okay.
That deals with the SAT.
Okay.
So we are changing the way we test our children
Okay.
through Common Core. That we know.
Right.
It's adaptive testing.
Right.
I have not heard that the SAT or the ACT is changing the way they test. And so we are now educating students in a fashion which won't serve their needs when they have to take the ultimate standardized test.
Right.
Whoa. I mean, that's concerning to me. Do you know if the College Board is looking at changing the way they test? I know you're a K district, but still.
Well, I'm not sure, but I will say this though, is that as the school districts, as they move towards Common Core and of course use the new testing methods, I think that then there will have to be a discussion because if everyone else is transitioning to more adaptive testing.
But now. I mean,
Right.
don't you think we need to have the discussion now?
I agree.
But are you hearing that discussion? I'm not hearing it.
Unfortunately, I'm not hearing that
Right.
discussion, but then again, at my level, maybe
But
I wouldn't
still,
be.
I mean, this to me seems like the question of the hour.
Right.
Look, for the kids that are in 10th and 11th grade, they've had the regular standardized test. It looks like the SAT, so they'll probably be fine.
Right.
But for 8th, 9th graders, I mean, they're changing the way that they'll be tested. They won't be used to these bubbleized tests.
Right.
And so what happens? Are they at a huge disadvantage?
Well-
I guess they're all, I guess in the 5 states they may not be, but in the 45 they may be.
I mean, that's a possibility, and I've always been of the opinion that testing alone should never be the only
we know
rubric
that.
for
Yeah,
measuring
no,
success.
We know that, but let's see if the colleges agree.
Yeah.
His name is Henry Lowe. He is a member of the school board at the Garvey School District. When we come back, we'll be speaking with Bob Bruesch, one of the incumbents that was successful in that election. The other two were not. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's Charter California Edition.
On average, how much is spent per public school pupil in the United States? $8,500, $9,500, $10,500, or $11,500. According to the Washington Post, the United States spends an average of $10,500 per pupil for education.
Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Yes, he is here, Bob Bruesch. He is the one incumbent that was victorious with the Garvey School District election. We just spoke with Henry Lowe. and we discussed the fact that there were 5 candidates for 3 seats, 3 incumbents were running, 1 incumbent won, that was you. Sir, clearly there was an anti-incumbent sentiment in your San Gabriel community, and yet you took 27% of the vote, the other 2 incumbents, 11 and 10%. How? How did you do it?
The community spoke.
But still, how did you do it? You know, it's remarkable to me, I don't mean to cut you off, that the community was able to so clearly distinguish between the 1 incumbent they liked and the 2 that they did not. That's stunning.
The message that went out from my campaign was, is it fair? Every time I passed out a flyer, I had very few things on it, but I said, is it fair?
It being what?
Is it fair that a person getting paid $150,000, $155,000 at the same time is receiving $114,000 in retirement from teachers' retirement, my teacher's retirement?
You're talking about double dipping?
Double dipping. Double
And
dipping.
Who's double dipping?
The superintendent.
Right. Who is likely not to return at the end of the school year.
I think there's a pretty good chance.
Right. Still, I still need to kind of delve into this as a pseudo-political scientist. I understand that you had a clear message, but it still is remarkable. I know it's a smaller election, but still, it's an off-year election, lower turnout. To have the 3 victorious candidates takes 28, 27, 24%, and then to drop to 11 and 10. What that says is the community knew what it wanted. How did the community know so clearly?
Absolutely. I think what has happened is with the city of Bell and everything else that's happened in politics, people in the small community, I'm not talking about like Los Angeles or like that. I'm talking about small communities. They're tired of being taken advantage of. They're tired of politics going on in the same old way. You scratch my back, I scratch yours.
One could argue you are the epitome of old politics. And I say that because how long have you been a school board member?
I've been a school board member 10 years, and I was on the city council for 20 years before that.
Hello? I mean, you've been an elected official for 30 years, and yet you were still able to distinguish yourself from the 2 incumbents that got swamped.
It's a matter of being part of the community, not over the community. I truly believe, because I've been there so long, I've been involved in so many different activities, Little League, the soccer leagues.
And you taught in the Garvey School District.
And I taught my son was adopted from one of our schools. I adopted him from one of our schools.
Is this a son that currently works at Garvey?
No.
Another son?
Yeah.
Right.
And it's just that after a while, you get to know the people. And yeah, Garvey is a district in transition.
Oh,
you know,
no doubt.
we are changing ethnic groups.
Demographically.
Demographically, we're becoming a different kind of
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. You know, I think it's fair to say that, I mean, how do I say this delicately? The 4 other candidates, their last names Chin, Yuen, Ramos, and Trabanino.
Yes.
These are ethnic last names. Asian descent, Latino descent, Bruesch. That's as European as they come.
German.
And I would presume that European Americans make up a sliver of the Garvey School District in San Gabriel.
Less than 1%.
Yeah, in the San Gabriel Valley. So that is even yet another example of how you were able, I'm not trying to be a sycophant, but I'm trying to really dissect it, how you were able to set yourself apart.
The fact is that when you're in the community and you talk with the community, not at the community, when you say, what is your need, not I will tell you what your needs are.
It's interesting you say that. We just spoke with Henry Lowe, one of your colleagues, who was not on the ballot this time around, and I asked him, how did Rob Bruesch win? And he was very specific, and it was a version of what you just said, which is he listens to the community. He listens to the stakeholders. Whether they agree with Bob Bruesch is another conversation, but they know they're being heard. But yet I've met Tony Ramos, for example. He was the president of your board. He came in last place with only 10%. I mean, a nice guy, a humble guy. Does not seem like someone that was beating his community over the head.
He was a former student of mine.
Former student of yours, so that's got to be somewhat bittersweet. I mean,
again, we had a candidates forum, and what happened was at the end of the forum, a couple people came up to me and said, you know, those two incumbents, they were talking at us.
interesting.
That was what they said. Two people said that. And basically what I have based my life on is that I'm out there in the community and I'm there with the community activities. I'm not out there telling them what to do. I'm out there asking them what they want me to do.
Well, let me ask you then. We have covered on this program the tumult within the Garvey School District surrounding your current superintendent. Arguably, the two, I know there was a vote to dismiss her 3-2. Two of the three that voted to dismiss her are now no longer on the board. So it's a different board. That being said, I mean, do you feel like the healing is ahead of you, or you're in the process of healing?
I have told everyone in the district, everywhere I go, now's the time for healing. Now we have to have the leadership that will help people come to terms with, yeah, we're not there yet, but we are going to be there, and we're going to work together to get there. Now, what I'm saying about there is improving the curriculum, improving the
Well, let's talk
student
about
conditions.
there, because there is a different place than it was last year.
Very different.
And that's because California, as I mentioned to Mr. Lowe, is one of 45 states that have adopted the Common Core standards, which we are now going through implementation. Really, revolution. It's a revolution in California.
You're speaking
education.
to the choir,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
30 years ago I worked with UCLA in the writing project and the reading project and the science project. All these projects were federally funded to help bring back educators to the fact that test taking is a way to find out what is happening with a child. It isn't a way to judge whether a child is a failure or is a success. It gives you a chance to remediate weaknesses.
I have to ask you, and I ask this of Henry, and I ask you because you are someone who's been a leader in education. With Common Core, the way we will do standardized testing is through what's called adaptive testing. If you get one question right, you'll get a harder question. If you get one question wrong, you'll get an easier question. It won't be all bubbleized. Amen. The SAT and the ACT has not changed their formula.
That is a problem.
So I've talked about this time and time again. What's going to happen?
However, the SAT still does have a written part.
They do, but the verbal and math, it's as bubbleized as they come. And the reality is, if our kids are being tested in Common Core, and then all of a sudden they have to shift gears to this bubbleized SAT, ACT, that's not going to be pretty.
You're talking about two different aspects of education. The testing that was designed for elementary schools and lower high schools was always meant to be a tool to prescribe remedies. It wasn't a tool to say this child was a failure. We've changed that.
Well, let's
with no
hope,
child left.
and I want you to come back because I do want to talk about this dissonance between Common Core and the College Board, okay? He is Bob Bruesch. He's the victor, one of the three in the Garvey School District on Brad Pomerance's Charter
you.
California edition.